I've heard from one source that he made them fly him, and then they had to fly to Hawaii to debrief him periodically. And so he got him a free trip to Hawaii out of it. He was that kind of guy. And it's a guy like that is going to throw a lot of crap up against the wall, and you got to discern on what's real and what isn't, and what you can take action on, what you can't. And then you got to be careful if you take action on something he told you about, and it comes out that, well, he's the only one that could have known this. And even though it didn't have anything to do with your case you're working on, it may be something else. Sometimes you just let stuff like that slide, even though it may be something that you should do or you could do something about, but you want to take the chance of burning him out and letting anybody have any idea, because, man, he was well placed. I mean, he was extremely well placed.
Yeah, well, they said the lefty, what was it? It was Operation Achilles.
Yeah, I think that's what his name. They called him Achilles.
They called it. But if Lefty's telling so much information, then a hot second later, they get David. He starts telling. Then Frank. I mean, that's a lot of telling for nothing really to happen. You know what I mean? A lot of people evidently are snitching, but there's not a lot of police action going. It seems like they needed a lot to get them, and they really didn't get anybody, but it seemed like everybody was telling on somebody.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by getting anybody. They certainly indicted and convicted the Tony Ripe. I mean, not Tony Ripe, but Nick Savella. Nick died before trial, but Carl Savella, his brother, and Tuffy DeLuna, the underboss, and Charlie Mortina, a couple others here in Kansas City, and Iupa, and La Pietra, and who else? Jackie Cerrone in Chicago, and Ballesteri in Milwaukee, and Milton Rockman in Cleveland. So something happened. They took down the heads of those four families. Something was happening. Not on that low level. You're talking about low level shit with Frank Culata and all that. That was like, Bureau didn't give a shit about hole in the wall gang and burglars and all that. Las Vegas Metro PD did, but they didn't care about that. They were going after the Teamsters and the top level people. And so those people all went down. You only got, you only could focus on so much at once. Frank Culata was like this low level guy. He didn't have anything to do with the skim. He ran a burglars crew. Now they wanted to take off Spilatro, and they were up there listening to him with Joey Lombardo and Alan Dorfman. They were listening to them talk up there, and they had enough to make them. Dorfman gets killed before it goes down. Spilatro gets killed before they can go to trial on it. So, but they were on their way down. So they took off the top people, those lower level people that Bowman's talking about. Ernie DeVito, he didn't cop. He took a hit on it and went to the joint for a while. Frank was going to take down Culata. I mean, Frank was going to take down Spilatro, but he got killed before he could take him down. So it's kind of two different things you're talking about there.
Well, what I meant is, yeah, they definitely took a lot of people down on the skim. But just the stuff they said Rosenthal was telling on, all the murders, a bunch of stuff he told on Tony. Then David is telling all the stuff on Frank. Frank starts telling on Tony. And basically nobody really gets any jail time because David's not even in trouble. He just decides he wants to tell. And he's not even in trouble. They end up getting I just believe, man, there was a lot of snitches in that whole situation.
Yeah, there was.
And then Frank just does a little bit of jail time, and gets out.
Yeah.
There is no loyalty no matter what you think about anything to do with crime. There is no loyalty.
Yeah, well, like I said, that's a different level from those upper level people that you're talking about there. And there's definitely no loyalty there. And back east, there's no loyalty on the upper level. Now, we never had anybody come in Kansas City in the higher level people at all. Nobody ever talked in Kansas City, testified or anything. I don't think anybody at that upper level in Chicago, none of them talked. Ballesteri took his hit, kept his mouth shut. So did Rockman. Now, Angelo Leonardo, and he was a Cleveland boss, he talked.
Yep.
Because he had a huge, big sentence waiting him for narcotics, which is, they know they're not getting narcotics, and you get these basically a life sentence for trying to make some money and not even have to kill anybody. But he talked. So it's the one stand-up guy out there was Ernie DeVino. So I got to know Ernie late in his life. I found him. I don't remember how I found him. I was able to talk to him on the phone several times, and shame on me, I never got back in touch with him and got him to record a podcast. He had done something online with his son, I think, and he talked a lot about some of that stuff. But Ernie, I researched him, and I found a newspaper article and actually maybe a gold appeal. No, it wasn't an appellate case, but I think it was a newspaper article. And when they out in Las Vegas, I believe it was maybe a Clark County case on Tony Spilotro, and he refused to talk about it. And he even testified that Tony Spilotro didn't know anything about this. I mean, that was a stand-up dude, and he took his, 8 or 10 years for that hole-in-the-wall gang thing, that burglary. So he was one stand-up dude.
In the movie Casino, they say that none of the bosses can go past Kansas City, and everybody meets in Kansas City. That's where they all. Is that true?
Oh, not exactly. Now, they did have one meeting, kind of famous meetings that we know about that most people don't know about is Alan Dorfman and I think Lombardo came down here and met with Nick Savella one time in the airport hotel. And don't know exactly what it was about other than it was something to do with the Teamsters, the pension fund, and the loaning money to buy casinos. They had another meeting somewhat like that. I think Dorfman was on it because Alan Dorfman was a key figure in this pension fund thing for the mob. And they met in a guy's house, kind of a periphery guy that lived over in what we call Philomena Acres. That's where all the mob guys lived. The Savellas lived there, and Nick's driver, Pete Tamburello, lived over there. Several other lived in this little neighborhood. And there was another guy, God, I think it was Jack Lascula. He was kind of a lower level Teamster official. And they met in his house. And these guys, they get advised by lawyers. So they did get a bug in the living room, and they went in the bedroom and met. And see, it takes more. It's almost impossible to get a hidden microphone in a bathroom. And next to that is the hardest room is the bedroom. Now, a common area like the living room or a den or something is a little bit easier to get. So, but they didn't get the microphone in the right room. Then one time, Nick wanted to have a meeting with Iupa, kind of in the middle of the skim, because we listened to him set it up with Iupa. They talked in Sicilian. He told him to. He told his contact, his nephew Anthony Schiavola, who was actually a Chicago policeman, lived up in Chicago, and he was setting up the meeting. It was going to be at Schiavola's house. I mean, how ideal is that? You have your meeting in Chicago Copper's house. So they're listening to him plan this out, and Nick Savella tells him to get some Lambrusco wine of a certain kind and set up an antipasto tray and have this, right wine and food, and he's going to meet Iupa and Jackie Cerrone, and they know when it is. They even were able to get in there and put a microphone in the room they discussed where they were going to be. And you hear Schiavola talking about, it was his sister's place or something, and he was going to get them out of there. And his son, who was another Chicago policeman, he was going to go out and sweep the streets, and which means they're going to check for any surveillance. They didn't see the surveillance. They got set up, looked at me like I saw a couple of pictures from it. They got set up across the street inside an apartment. They probably rented an apartment. Hell, the FBI would have bought a whole building to get something like that. And so they get the microphone in, and it's real quick turnaround time too. They get the microphone in, they're set up on him, they know he's coming in, they're listening to him, they're on Schiavola's phone because there's phone calls between he and his son, and he's telling his son, okay, get out and sweep the streets, and his son goes back and calls and said it looks good, and Schiavola said, okay, bring them on in. And Cerrone and Iupa come walking in, they parked a block or two off. Nick Savella, somebody picked them up at the airport and brought them in. And the microphone, the kind of area where they figured it was going to be was on the second floor, and Iupa's had some heart problems by then. He gets in, and it turns out later on they find out because there's nothing. We got the head of the Kansas City mob and the head of Chicago outfit meeting, and they're going to discuss whether Kansas City can buy the Stardust or buy out Chicago's piece of that action. And then nothing, not a thing. And Iupa did not want to walk up to the second floor. So, you win some, you lose some. Now, later on, before this investigation's over, they do get a hidden microphone in the house of this relative of Savella's, Josephine Marlowe, and they have the two moles in Las Vegas at the Tropicana who've been sending a big stream of skim back from the Tropicana meet, and they describe exactly how it all went down. It was the most damning conversation you ever heard. So really, that's not true. That Kansas City may go to Chicago may come to Kansas City. Just kind of depends on the need.
And two, in the movie, he says, and like this old fuck from Detroit. So what across the wiretap and all that? What do you know about Detroit?
Well, they're probably, when they said that, I got a feeling they were talking about a former St. Louis lawyer named Morris Schenker. He was an old fuck from Detroit, or represented Detroit, had connections to Detroit, had connections all the way back to Hoffa. If they were talking about that kind of a description, now Detroit, because they'd known Hoffa in Detroit, the Licavoli and kind of not real good on those names, Toko, Giacalone, Tony Jack, and
Zarelli.
Zirelli, yeah. So some of those guys, they had really good connections with Hoffa going back, so they had money. They had points in that. I believe it was the Dunes was the one they had their money in, and we talk about owning a casino. Well, see, they didn't own a goddamn casino. They didn't own anything. They simply influenced the Teamsters Pension Fund to loan certain people money, and then they would buy the casino or points in the casino and get themselves in management positions. And then the way they paid back that favor of that influence for getting them the Teamsters loan would be to skim money and send it back, the cash money back to the mobsters. And the mobsters kind of set up their own courier service. They didn't really make those guys bring it back, but they made them provide it. And then they, just like in the movie Casino, they go in with a bag and get a bag full of cash and bring it back to Kansas City. Now we caught one of them here in Kansas City. That's the only person who was ever caught